What's up, YouTube? It is spring 2022, April, and I have been neglecting keeping up with my blog. I'd like to tell you that I had lots of good reasons. I had a few, but it's not good. My career has just been hit and miss as of late, so I'm just trying to keep up with stuff, and it's hard to come back to the PC when you've got 1,000 other things on your plate. So I'm gonna try really hard to start getting back into this channel again. I want to continue on with my stories of a porn addict, and this one I'm calling the Irresponsible Father. This one hurts. I've been trying to not do this one, and I freely admit that I've been trying to avoid this one because it just sucks. You never want to do the ones that hurt, and that's the reason why you have to do it, right? It's part of the whole reason of doing this blog series is to get others to get comfortable telling their stories, the stuff that really sucks, right? Getting into the dirt. And the more you bring light to these things, the more you're thinking about them, and it gives you the executive control to understand where hurt and pain comes from and to remember why you don't want to engage in these behaviors. And the reoccurring theme that I get from doing these stories of, stories from a porn addict is that there were multiple times over my life where I was actively engaged in addiction, where I did really shitty or stupid things, and I wasn't acknowledging them at the time for them being as shitty or as stupid as they actually were. But in retrospect, when you look at it, you're just like, what did I do? Man, I really wasn't thinking. So let's get on with this story today. So I was recently reading a blog post, and it was entitled "How Addiction Changes Priorities." And there were a few things, there were a few bullet points on this post that just kind of summarized things to think about during an addiction. And one of the things was taking care of children, being a good family member, financial responsibilities, being a reliable friend, work school responsibilities, being a good neighbor, personal health and self care, being a responsible pet owner, taking care of possessions, and being a productive member of society. But I really wanted to focus on number one, taking care of children. And there is a lot, since I've been a father, there's a lot of things that I've done that were were not in my child's behavior, were not in my child's best interest. They were in my best interest, right? And I know lots of times we like to think about the old airline analogy where, if something happens, you put the mask on yourself so that you can save the child. But oftentimes what happens is that in our brain, we do things that we think are good for us in order to help others, but really they're just good for us. They're not helping anyone else at all. And that thing that we think that's good for us is actually quite bad for us. It's just that it feels good, so we do it, but it's not good for anyone really, even ourselves. So what do we mean by taking care of children, and why is this inside of my framework? And I know a lot of people listening to this maybe aren't fathers yet or are early on in the process, but oftentimes when we're getting into that addiction, we're doing things and we're taking part in actions that are just self-soothing, that have no bearing on helping anyone, including ourselves. Um, and I know for me, for the porn addiction, like I was constantly trying to find an out, where I could spend time like looking at porn and masturbating and feeling good for myself. And anytime you're doing that, you're making a conscious choice. You're making a choice about what you could be doing versus what you actually are doing. And even in the times where the antithesis of what you're trying to do may not be present. For example, like I know for me, a lot of my porn engagement was when my family was asleep, right? So you're thinking to yourself, well, they're asleep, right? So what good could I possibly be doing? I'm just leaving the blank space there, right? What good could you possibly be doing? So in your mind, you're thinking that, oh, this could be self-soothing time. This is just time for me and no one's getting hurt, right? Well, if you heard my other blog posts, you know that all those other times you could be, sleeping, right, is saving your sanity. So you're not, waking up aggravated, frustrated, letting anxiety build up, those sorts of things. So there's actually self care involved that helps you later on and helps your family later on, right? So it's, when the addict starts talking, it's chewing up your time and rationalizing how you could use that time to your own benefit. And that time is to feed the addiction as opposed to doing something that sounds boring, like sleep, right? Sleep, fuck that. No, sleep's important. Sleep drives your behaviors. And I know this in recovery. Sleep drives lots of positive behaviors inside of your life so that you can do other positive things for your family, right? So taking care of the children, God, just got to tell this story. So early on, when we had our first child, um, my my child was asleep, right? She fell asleep in my arms. And I was on the main floor of my house. Then I was living in a townhouse, and so it was 3 stories. And I had my office in the basement level, and of course that's where I went to when no one else was around, so I could masturbate. So that was my porn surfing location, my safe space. And my daughter fell asleep, and I had a nice big leather couch, and it was like really wide, and it's soft. Like when you sit in it, your butt would naturally sink into it, but like if you put a baby into it, it nestled the baby like a cradle. So she was like out cold, and I was like, I'm gonna go jerk one out right now. And so rather than put the baby in the crib, I put her on the couch. And in my mind at that point was just focus on nothing but getting off. And I was already doing the anticipation, the planning, that sort of thing. So the baby's and she's a very deep sleeper normally when she back in those months. And I put her on the couch, and I went downstairs, and I'm thinking, man, it'll just be a few minutes, and I'll go tug one out, and I'll go pick up the baby, and it'll be like nothing ever happened. So this this planning is going on in my mind, and I'm painting pictures of what the best case scenario is going to look like. And what do you think actually happened, right? Before I tell you, what do you think actually happened? Painting that picture. Obviously, that painted picture was a bunch of bullshit. And what actually ended up happening is I went downstairs, and I'm like, nothing happens fast when you're a porn addict like I'm a porn addict. Nothing happens fast. There's no such thing as quickly spanking one out, because um, what I'm doing is I'm doing that searching and seeking and trying to find. So like part of my porn addiction is the time consuming process of finding the right content, because the early days of just finding something and getting off, that shit don't happen no more. And it's time, the time consumption part is what gets lost inside of my brain. Something that seems like it should take a few minutes actually ends up taking like a half hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and like later on into my addiction, hours, right? Um, so I don't know how much time passes, which is part of the addiction. I hear boom, and then the baby starts crying. So obviously, what had happened is she rolled over in her sleep, rolled over so much that she got out of that nice, soft, cushy spot and rolled over on the couch. And we had hardwood floors. So when she actually hit the floor, boom! It was loud, man. And I could hear it in the basement. And I am just feeling like the most rotten, irresponsible father in the fucking universe at that second. I go up, and she's okay, and I'm like, rocking her back to sleep. And you know, porn was lost on me for the rest of the day because I felt like such a shithead. But that stopped me from trying to put more restrictions on my behavior. Oh hell no. Like, I learned that lesson that day, that just don't leave her on the couch when I wanted to go look at porn, but I did stop me from doing porn. And that's the real calling card of an addiction, because you're not learning from from the cause and effect of like the bad behavior. What you're doing is you're really trying to mitigate the risk that you just presented to you, and you just try to cover it up. um, so I felt like shit that day, but I got over the shittiness real quick because my addict brain wanted to keep going for more and more porn. And it didn't stop me from isolating my daughter in the future either, because there would be plenty of other times where I would either, put her in front of a TV, or put her in front of a game or a doll or something like that. So it would give me the opportunity to go spank one out. And that's just that's just what happened, man. Like my addictive brain was just all over the place and just trying to want to get more and more and get off more and more. Um, and I felt like I did not feel like the father of the year for that whole incident. It was just a terrible, terrible experience. And it's funny in recovery now when I look back at that, and even when I say it out loud, I'm like, what was I thinking? What was I doing? But that's the nature of an addict, man. That's the nature of an addict. We will do the dumbest, stupidest shit and justify it in our minds as well. Okay, well, I made a mistake, but in the future I'll do this, or in the future I'll do that, as opposed to acknowledging that the behavior that we were engaged in the first place was stupid. That the masturbating to porn, when you should have had the responsibility of being a good father, of being a good caretaker, all that went out the window. It was all about self-service. And I think this is the nature of what we're getting to. The core of telling our stories is acknowledging the shittiness of all the things that we do. And that by far was one of the shittiest things I have ever done as an addict. Anyway, I'm glad to be back online. I'm glad to be recording these things, and I've got a lot more stories to tell. So I'm going to try to carve out some more time to get to it. Anyway, thank you so much for listening. I hope you found this useful, and if you did find it useful, please subscribe. All this content's free. It's given out as a courtesy to help other porn addicts get over their addiction. Um, have a good day and keep fighting.